What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Hive Prometheus. I know it's been a little while since I've put out a video. I do actually have some footage left over from a previous battle report that I am going to edit up and throw up on here. However, I've been doing a lot of prep recently for a 6-round event that I just attended over the weekend. It was the Denver Fight Club Open 2024. This is the largest event I've attended personally, and I did so with 2 other of my teammates on the Denver Mountain Trolls, Matt Evans and Ben Neal. If you're a longer-term subscriber to this channel, you know that I have been running and playing Crusher Stampede for a long time now, about 10 months, and I've approached 60 games using the detachment after this GT, and that's what I wanted to take to this tournament to see if I could stretch my legs and see how we would do in a larger meta. Going ahead and going over the list that I took to the tournament, I only have one leader. I have Swarmlord. I wanted to take him because I thought that Crusher Stampede, as I knew how to play it, struggled with midfield threats, and I felt like if I could dominate the middle of the battlefield better than my opponent, that I would generally have an upper hand, and I thought that having Swarmlord's 12-inch Vect would be helpful for anything that can go to the midfield and get things like Lance or Lethals or Fights First on melee armies or Armor of Contempt on things such as Blood Angels. I have 2 battle line gargoyles and hormagaunts. The first 2 missions were banners, so I did want to get a couple extra points for battle line holding objectives at the end of the turn. I have 2 lictors so that they can infiltrate, go off and do objectives, and if I need to, I can use them as pieces to trade. Potentially to kill characters that are necessary for assassinate, or as extra bodies to screen against midfield threats. I have a Biovore so that I can seed mines, potentially stopping advances and charges, and in order to score the 3 secondaries that are still able to be scored with Spore Mines, which is Area Denial behind enemy lines and engage on all fronts. I have triple Exocrine. They're our best quality shooting. They're Strength 9 AP3 for 3, D6 plus 3 blast, and they've got a 36-inch range. I think they're one of our best monsters in the Codex. They're definitely an A+, maybe an S tier unit internally. I have 2 Malceptors specifically so that I could split my forces and have a -1 to hit aura within 6 inches of them so that I could potentially protect Swarmlord or the other Tyranid I brought. And then speaking of which, I have 3 Tyranid. I had 2 with Rupture Cannon and 1 with Acid Spray. I specifically, again, wanted to double up a little bit on some defense for the midfield. The Acid effects end up coming in handy for other reasons, specifically for denying things that we're going to go into reserves after my turn and come back in on a subsequent turn, or things such as the Malefic Crystal, or it's the Dark Crystal for Thousand Suns, when they're able to teleport a Rubric squad, even potentially in turn 1. So I'm going to go ahead and go to some of the pictures I had for the tournament, and I'm going to run through and just talk about my experience in each of the rounds. All right, so round 1, I kind of got thrown to the wood chipper a little bit. I matched up with Chaos Daemons. He had 4 large demons. He had a Lord of Change, Big Bird. He had 2 Keeper of Secrets, I believe they are. One is Shalaxi, the named character. One was a Great Unclean one. And then he had a bunch of Slaanesh demons. They're very quick. Sometimes they have dev wounds, sometimes they have lethals, but they almost all move 14 inches and have the option to advance and charge. He had a couple squads of Nurglings just to infiltrate into the midfield. We sort of had a little bit of a face-off to see, where we're going to put the majority of each other's forces. I think it was after this game I immediately realized that it's not necessarily the stratagems that are going to be strengthening this army. It's just sometimes Shalaxi's just there, and she rerolls all hits and all wounds and all damage. And she pretty much anything she touched, she killed except for the Tyranid down near my home objective on turn 4 or 5. We did end up trading home objectives. I was able to Rapid Ingress a Lictor to kill the character in the back to strip 5 primary from him. This was Taken Hold, Banners, and Tipping Point. I did have a good shadow turn. I was able to strip 10 primary off of him, but I think I needed just 1 extra unit of chaff to go and steal an objective. I threw my Hormagaunts into the middle, I believe, to get Area Denial or Cleanse or one of the objectives. I have my Lictor up there and the Hormagaunts doing that action. I believe this is after turn 2. I did go first. He had bottom of 5, so he was able to score 15 primary on his last turn, whereas I was able to score 10, and the final score ended up being 76 to 80. I had never played demons before. I think the big problem here was not having a 3rd unit of gaunts that I could throw and screen or steal 1 extra primary. And then also I would have switched Swarmlord to the Hive Tyrant so that I would have the advance and shoot with the Assault Aura and lethals. If I could just do a little extra damage, I left Shalaxi two times on 5 and 8 before she was able to battle shock herself, succeed, and heal D3. That was something that I didn't know about demons. I knew about the Shadow of Chaos, them being able to deep strike outside of 6 inches in their deployment zone, or outside of 6 in the midfield if they controlled 2 or more of the objectives. I did a good job of keeping them off the midfield, but it was just a little too late, and I needed just a little extra movement and a little extra punch, and I think the Hive Tyrant would have given that to me. So for having not faced Chaos Demons in this, arrangement before, I really shouldn't be angry, but I am. I really struggled sort of not beating myself up over this game because I essentially lost this game at list building. Regardless of my performance in that first game, I just need to kind of roll with the punches and move on to round two. We did have lunch, but I think having a break between first game and second game for me gave me too much space to think. I think it would have been better if I just rolled through the day. Rounds 2 and rounds 3 only had about a half-hour break, so it didn't allow me much time to really think. I kind of just had to jump to and move on to the next game, which is probably the reason why I dwelled on it for so long. But rolling into round 2, I went up against Space Wolves. I also had never faced Space Wolves. So going up against double Thunderwolf Cav, Canis Wolfborn, I don't think he had any Dreadnoughts on the list. He had some jump pack infantry, was kind of, I don't know, something very non-standard than what I would have taken as a Space Wolf player. But Canis Wolf did come down in points, and I think that was a big draw for Imperium armies that they could ally him in for much less. I might be wrong about that. Canis Rex might have gone up a little bit, but regardless, he's very powerful. So Canis Rex started on the board in the midfield, hidden, so that the Rupture Fexes couldn't get line of sight on him. He had one of the squads of Thunderwolf Cav off the board to rapid ingress, which I think would be fine against other softer targets. I think for me, he kind of just needed to overwhelm me with most of his stuff. And that was something I told him after this game. He threw Canis Rex into the midfield, turn 2, I think to kill my Tyrannifex. I don't think I necessarily wanted to blow him up in that instance, but he did. I rolled a d6 and I rolled a 6, so I did end up hurting some of my monsters, but I did about 4 wounds to Canis, bringing them to 20. And on the subsequent turn between the Excrants, the Maleceptor, actually both Maleceptors, because I was able to come around the terrain on the upper left here and get line of sight with everything, and both Rupture Fexes, I was able to one round and kill Canis Rex. So that was a pretty big blow. And then the Thunderwolf Cav that were coming down the southern flank, moving towards the west on the bottom of the map, he was able to tie up some of my monsters in the fray down there, but Swarmlord and some of the monsters were able to fight them off using Infrasonic Roar to give -1 to hit, and I was able to battle shock that squad. They were additionally -1 to wounds, so they lost their instance of lethals. They were not able to kill a single monster down there. I think that was very lucky. At the upper left-hand corner, where the other squad of Thunderwolf Cavalry eventually came in, they charged into my Haruspex. They wanted to be outside of 6 of the Maleceptor that had just shot Canis Rex, so that they could forego the instance of -1 to hit. And then as I whittled them down, they additionally did not want to continue piling in, so only 2 of the bases were able to make attacks in the Haruspex, eventually only leaving him on 1. Before the Lictor and a couple other things. I think the Swarmlord ended up going north to finish them off. This game, I need to look back at the score here. This game was a little unfortunate for my opponent. He did seem to be a little newer with the army. I don't think that he had no reps with the army, but I think he definitely had less than 5. So our clock time was very strict. It was 1 hour and 15 minutes per player, and once you timed out, I called the judge in his last minute because I wanted to just be sure. I said, what are the clock rules? And he said his hard clock rules: dice down, no progressive scoring, no flipping cards, no action in which you would be able to score. We're on a schedule, and we just want to make sure people aren't taking additional time or additional actions that they wouldn't be able to, which was brutal. My opponent timed out in turn 4, top of turn 4. I had 4.5 minutes on my clock. I was then able to take my bottom of turn 4 and bottom of turn 5 without needing to really worry about any interaction from my enemy tying me up before I could go get on primary or take any of my actions. So on paper, it's a win, but I almost felt like it was a little hollow. It was 92 to 77. It's a 15-point spread, but I think if my opponent was able to score primary, it would have been a 10-point game. I can't remember whether or not he was battle ready or not. For the tournament, since we were using new rules and new points because of the Blood Angels Codex coming out that same weekend, the option to have your army battle ready was not a requirement. You were always awarded those 10 battle ready points. So I don't think there was a matchup in which that would have meant the difference between victory and defeat for me. It just would have shored up the score and made closer games. But a 15-point win over Space Wolves, and I never faced them before. So I'm back to 50-50. I'm feeling a little bit better. Still beating myself up a little bit on that Demons game. But like I said, you pack up your stuff, you get ready, you look at matchups, and you head to the next table. It's basically no waiting time. And I was matched up into my third matchup. So for round three of So for my third match of the day and the last one for day one, I matched into Tau Retaliation Cadre. I matched up against John Kilcommon, and if anybody in the area knows, he is an extremely experienced player of Tau. He admitted to me after the game that he has played about 200 games of 10th edition. I think the skill gap here could be felt just a little bit. He also had practiced previously on the Fight Club terrain, which is the terrain layouts that you've seen pop up from time to time when you've been looking at the pictures here throughout the video. The game went so quickly that I didn't have time to snap a photo because I was kind of shocked. Nobody has been so close to tabling me in any of my games of Crusher Stampede. The dice were against me a little bit, and I think we both realized it. There were definitely some more expletives coming out of me than there would normally during a game. But he was a very cool guy. I mean, he had a very tough round one. He lost by about 6 points to I wouldn't say so much an experienced player, but somebody who kind of just rattled him. And he said that at least this game with him, it was much more enjoyable. We were laughing and telling jokes throughout, but the dice were definitely against me. On 5 wounds from one of the melty squads on my Hive Tyrant, I made none of them, and he did something like 30 damage. There were some things that were happening. He was killing 2 of my toughest monsters every turn, Malceptors or Tyrannifexes. And then additionally on top of that, in no instance did I want any of those monsters to explode because I was within 6 a lot of the time. And 3 of the times my monsters exploded. So my Tyrannifex, a Malceptor, and my Swarmlord when it died. So I was doing almost as much damage to myself just in pure mortal wounds as he was doing with Meltas after blanking saves and armor saves. So the score here, I mean, shouldn't be too surprising. It wasn't a complete blowout. I at least got in the 60s. It was 68 to 95. I mean, not a fun loss, but I think people say that losing to a better player you shouldn't really be ashamed of. This ended my day at 1-2. I took that pretty hard. I had about an hour drive back home. And normally I listen to music in the car, and it was stone silent. I think it was after day one that I realized that not having a Hive Tyrant on your list hampers your movement. For our monsters that only move 8 inches, when the majority of vehicles in the Imperium datasheets move 8 to 12, and so a lot of times they have the ability to advance and charge, advance and shoot. They're assault vehicles, or I'm sorry, they're vehicles with assault ramps so that they can move and then disembark and have units charge. There are little things that Tyranids just don't have. So hampering your movement in list building by not having a Hive Tyrant for a list that is majority, 92 by 120 millimeter bases that move 8 inches, it essentially looks like you're only moving the length of your base plus 2 inches. So being able to move an additional 1 or 6 inches over the course of 5 turns is 5 to 30 inches of extra movement per monster potentially if you are advancing everything up the board. So I then realized that I was kind of just stuck with my list. So I was like, okay, what do I need to do differently? I'm getting stuck in my deployment a little bit. I can't move. I'm not getting the firing angles that I want. Looking back at the terrain layouts, I think, a lot of the ruins are about 1 inch wider. They're 7 by 12s and they're 7 by 10s, not 6 by 10s or 6 by 12s. I calculated it's about 100 square inches additional cover on the map, and a lot of those extend to give much less beneficial hard corner shots. So moving 8 inches and having perfect line of sight, normally on GW terrain, you don't have on Fight Club terrain. So day 2, I thought I need to go in reserving more of my shooting monsters. I need to find angles and bring them onto the board where I wouldn't even be able to put that Exocrine or that Haruspex or something in 2 or 3 turns of movement. So even if they do come in on turn 2 or 3, they're in a place unscathed and still alive, giving me some sort of advantage that I wouldn't have otherwise. So that was my plan rolling into day 2. So on day 2, I do have a picture for that game. I matched up into Thousand Suns, so I'll throw us over to the picture here as I can and I'll continue explaining. All right, day two, first matchup into Thousand Suns. Same layout as I believe against Space Wolves here. Layout two, I believe. So I had a much better deployment. Just any deployment with diagonals for me, I feel like I'm much more confident on. Things like Tipping Point, Hammer and Anvil, Dawn of War makes it a lot harder for me to gain angles with my guns to sort of threaten the opponent. But here on, I believe this is Sweeping Engagement. It gives me diagonal deployments with some pretty good terrain, some larger footprints. I hadn't played Thousand Suns, I think it was November of last year, November 2023. And my opponent had a very different list. He had Terminators, he had a Rhino full of rubrics. This guy was running your Meta Thousand Suns list. You know, he had your Magnus, he had two of the Mutilated Vortex Beasts. I think he had two squads of cultists, and then he had three squads of five rubrics, each with Artemon, two Infernal Masters, and one Exalted Sorcerer. Pretty standard list. I had seen this list played several times on battle reports, or at least hearing from people on the Tyranid Discord, so I knew that they're a glass cannon. They can do incredible amounts of damage if they get a line of sight on you, and the movement shenanigans and the mortals that they can do, which bypass the Tyranid effects blank, because it's not attack that's allocated, it's an ability. I had to be very cagey, and I thought if I poke certain things out at range, you can actually see in the upper left hand here, my Tyranid effects with the Rupture Cannon is peeking from behind one of those square cereal boxes, what we were calling them. His only ability to get up and hit me was popping out one of my Mutilated Vortex Beasts, which I could then converge on and shoot both my Tyrant Effects into, and potentially an Excrement. I'm pretty sure with average rolls, because of the 5-up invuln, I could probably kill it, especially with the CP if I had to reroll damage for one of the Tyrant Effect shots that gets through. Because on average, instead of it being about 8.5 or 9.5 damage, I can make it 10.5. That one extra damage could matter. I did not know that they had 5-up Feel No Pains, so that threw off my math a little bit, but I think with the amount of guns I had, it was enough. Yet again, there was another instance where I was like, man, I could just be wounding them 50% easier with my Exocrines because they're strength 9. If I just roll a 6, I don't have to go to the wound roll. I just wound them immediately. So yet another instance that I'm making the case that Hive Tyrant is probably our best solo Tyrant body leader, and then Neuro Tyrant is probably second. If you're going to go something more akin to Invasion or Nexus, I think you could do Hive Tyrant Swarmy, but that's beside the point. So we essentially spent 2 turns just staring at each other. I had the advantage with my Lictors and my Hormagaunts. My Hormagaunts were able to charge in, basically kill a squad of cultists. My Lictors were sitting idle and doing actions. In order for him to come out and kill anything for no prisoners, which I think he got for 2 points instead of the full 5 that he wanted, he would have to commit something. He'd have to commit the rubrics. He was able to come out, shoot the rubrics, and then use the double move to go back into the terrain piece in his deployment zone. The rubrics and Magnus sat there for almost 3 turns, which to me is good. That means that I'm controlling the midfield here. I have a stronger position. I'm at least established. He did come up to Doombolt twice on my Tyrant effects with Rupture Cannon in the middle of the board here. He only did 7 damage. He rolled a 1 and a 2, and he rolled a low on the D3 plus 3s. So cool, I'm left at 9. I can move and still shoot on 2s. I decided that it's better for me to pull back and be within a 7-inch movement with a pivot or a 9-inch to come over the piece of terrain in front of him so I could go towards the middle if I need to use his OC5. That did not end up happening, but that's okay. This game, let me look at score here. I did end up winning, which that's great. I was kind of surprised I met Thousand Suns in the bracket I was in at 1-2, but a 93-79 win on Ritual, Swift Action, and Crucible Battle. I did go first on Ritual, and I was able to battle shock him on 2 of his Ritual objectives to strip 10 primary. If I had not done that, if he had not failed any of that, it would have been very close. It would have been 93-89, but I'll take it. Win against Thousand Suns, especially the Crusher Stampede. Not too bad. Rolling into game 4 here. All right, going on to round 5 here, I matched up into World Eaters. I thought to myself, finally a Marine army other than Thousand Sons. I generally know that my list does pretty well into Marine armies. Elite infantry usually come at a premium, so being able to have a volume of 3 damage weapons between the Maleceptors and Exocrines is something that I generally look forward to. I guess I also had not played against World Eaters in something like 7 months. And it was obviously on GW terrain, not Fight Club here. There were 2 things here that particularly I did not look out for, and I was wondering why Angron just spent 3.5 turns sitting and doing nothing. So the terrain pieces, the big L's in the upper left-hand corner and the bottom right-hand corner, their wall edge is 3 inches from the board, not 4, if you look at the photo for the Fight Club terrain. So in one instance, at the top left-hand corner, my Maleceptor comes around the building. I get line of sight to 3 8-bound. I shoot and kill 2, and I'm attempting a charge, and my opponent says, "You can't." That's a 3-inch gap. And I called a judge because I wanted to just hear it from his mouth. I didn't want to argue with my opponent about it. And he pulled up the map and he said, "Yep, that's a 3-inch wall. So 92 by 120 millimeter bases cannot go through there." So I was unable to make my charge. Left 8-bound there with 1 guy left. And in the next turn, I had to move my Maleceptor to heroically intervene when that 8-bound charged my Lictor, which gave me some free movement. I'll use the CP for that gladly. The Lictor and the Maleceptor were able to kill the 8-bound. I consolidated 3 inches closer to the center of the objective to be at the corner of the building, and the next round I trammeled Ferocity through the building to have line of sight to the midfield. Using the 8-bound, he had 3 squads of 3 8-bound and 2 squads of 6 Exalted 8-bound. I was not aware that Exalted 8-bound on the charge are Strength 15, AP 3 for 3 damage. They hit on 4s, but they reroll everything on objectives. So that's terrifying to wound anything in my army on 3s and basically converts 68 to 70% of their attacks with rerolls to hit. So I have a huge shooting castle down in my deployment zone. Really the only things that came up to kind of, have a staring contest with the 8-bounds and daring them to come to the middle were the Acid Effects and the Horror-Specs. Those are the 2 monsters that I'm willing to throw away. Sort of as a trading piece, as bait. If I throw the Hardspecs to the middle and I say, "Hey, I'm T11, 3-up armor," and they kind of go, "Oh, this guy has confidence that his monster will live," well, I'll show him. That's good. That's my bluff. I want you to come kill him. He's not the thing that I want to blow up. It's the acids. It's the acid spray Tyranid effects behind him. I can Overwatch, hopefully kill an 8-bound or 2 before he makes the charge. I can use Infrasonic Roar to give them -1 to hit. They'll go to hitting on 5s. Or maybe they hit on 3s naturally rerolling and they were hitting on 4s with the Infrasonic Roar. Regardless, I'm trying to strip as many hits as possible so that on their wound roll, if they roll a lot of 1s and 2s, I potentially can save that Haruspecs. It didn't happen. He still did like 18 damage to my Haruspecs. Just let him die, and then keeping the Tyrannifex outside 4.1 inches of the model that would be able to wrap the Haruspecs makes it so that they cannot make a consolidation move after the fight into the Tyrannifex. They have to consolidate back to the objective. At that point, there were 2 spawn, the little demons, and then 5 of the Exalted 8-bound left, and Angron had joined the fray. He came down, he swiped the Tyrannifex. I was able on the next turn to shoot down all of the 8-bound. I ignored the spawn because they're only OC1 a piece, I believe, and I put as much as I could into Angron. I got Angron down to 3. I charged with the Swarm Ward. I got 3 wounds on him, and he spiked all 4+ invulnerables. He then went with Angron to fight back. Yeah, he fought back on Swarm Ward. Swarm Ward tanked it, thank God. I think I only failed 1 save. Yeah, I think I only wounded 2 times and I failed 1 save, and he only did 5 damage. So bringing the Hive Tyrant down to half. Bringing the Swarm Lord down to half, obviously. On turn 5, he drew a bunch of secondaries that he realistically needed more bodies to do actions with. I popped Shroud the Warp. I shocked the squad of 6 8-bound that were on the bottom left-hand objective. He was going to cleanse and try to burn there with the spawn and the 8-bound. Both of them battle shocked. So the only thing that could go down there to get, I think it was Cleanse and Storm Hostile, was Angron. So Angron fell back, got Storm there on 3 wounds, because if he stayed in combat, he would die from the Swarm Lord. And in the middle, the spawn were attempting to do Cleanse, and pulling of the Cleanse card, you actually have to hold an objective to complete Cleanse. You cannot just do it like Scorched Earth. I had Rapid Ingressed my Yeah, okay. If you're seeing here, you one of my excrements is missing. I actually put it in reserve and I rapid ingressed it on the north of the map with some of my gargoyles. I then had line of sight to shoot some of the 8-bound that were in the back line here, softening up potentially anything that could come towards the middle to get Swarmlord on that last turn. But what with the battle shock that I was able to get on turn 5, it made it so that he scored something like only a 7-point turn as opposed to a 14. I was able to charge Swarmlord into Angron, kill him, take the objective, and then end up burning the objective in the upper left-hand corner to win 77 to 67. So a little tighter than I would have wanted it to be, but a win's a win. I think if he had committed his forces pretty much immediately and said, hey, I have an overwhelming amount of bodies here that you have to deal with, this is the go turn. If you do it, you win. If you don't, I just take your deployment zone. I told him that at the end of the game, and he said, just because I can be fast and I can be in the midfield doesn't necessarily mean I want to do it. And I just left it at that. I was like, all right, man. And then he told me, you better win the next round so my win path is better. Good luck. So, pretty fun game. The final match of the day, I again didn't get a picture. It was a game that I think at this point I was getting a little bit fatigued. I was having a much more exciting day two, so I do think I was more focused. I also had a better night of sleep. The on Friday night into Saturday, I didn't sleep much. I went to bed at like 2 in the morning, and I had to wake up early for the drive, and I over caffeinated to kind of get through the day. On the second day, I did sleep better. I had 2 wins, and I felt pretty confident going to this, just from sort of gauging the experience of my opponent that I should be able to do well here. But guess what's been the theme of all tournament is, oh, I wish I had a Hive Tyrant instead of Swarmlord. And this was another match that I think it would have mattered a lot. So going up against Knights, Imperial Knights, he had a Knight Errant with Mysterious Guardian, with a Thermal Cannon, and I can't remember the other weapon. He had Canis Rex. There's Canis Rex again, the melee threat. And then he had a Armiger Moirax, 3 Helverins with the auto cannons, the 3 damage auto cannons at 36 or 48 inch range. They're far. And then I think he had 4 other small knights. So between the 2 big knights and I think it was 8 small knights, I was just like, there's tons of OC here. It's taken hold with hidden supplies. So there's 6 objectives. And I thought to myself, if I don't get bottom of 5, I don't think I have a chance of winning. We go for the roll off, and I have to go first. And I was like, this game's going to suck. So I did my best to do the same thing as I did against the Space Wolf player. I think I needed to just kind of pull him towards the middle, and I guess same with the World Eaters player. If I can give him some stuff that I feel like he's going to gain some value off of, feeding him my lictors, feeding him my action units, and then saving all of my damage to kill them back, then I might have somewhat of a chance. But another thing I'm running into, the Imperium armies just move faster than us. The mini knights move like 12 or 14. The big knights move 10. They can move through buildings. They don't have to use Untrammeled Ferocity like we do in Crusher Stampede to get through those buildings. And then the Mysterious Guardian Knight came onto the field on the upper left-hand corner behind one of the big L's. The map was the same as layout 1. I'll always throw up that image here so you can see. But on turn 2, I was able to shoot 2 of the Helverins, one in the middle and one in the north of the map. In the north of the map, I left him on 1. In the middle, I left him on 4. I kept no prisoners and bring it down for the next turn, I believe. It was just bring it down. I kept bring it down for the next turn, just as sort of a threat that if he commits more things towards the middle, I'll be able to kill those 2 pretty easily and potentially something else big. He rapid ingressed his Knight Errant into pretty much the kill zone. He came in and swiped a monster with a thermal cannon. Failed the charge, wasn't able to get onto the objective, or maybe I think he was able to get onto the objective in the shooting phase, and then he shot and killed the thing that he meant to charge. And then I essentially got secondaries on my turn 3 that I had to kill him. I got Storm Hostile Objective, and I had Bring It Down. So I was like, well, I can kill those 2 knights, and I need to kill him. So I brought up Swarmlord to be within 12. He only had 1 CP. The Vect, lo and behold, actually mattered this game. He could not rotate Ion Shields because it would have cost him 2, which when I told my opponent that, he rolled his eyes and got really upset. I was able to kill that Knight Errant with all of my shooting. Between the Excrements, the Maleceptors, and the Tyrefexes, I was able to put pretty much all guns on him and kill him. I would have been able to do it probably with 2 less monsters if I had the Hive Tyrant for lethals. I don't know exactly what the math would have looked like if I had lethals instead of being able to Vect his 4-up Invuln with Rotate Ion Shields. regardless, I think it would have mattered because the Excrants most of the time would have been able to reach out to the Hellrins and wound them much easier because they're T10 and the Excrants are Strength 9. So whatever. I think Knights are they're just a bad matchup for Tyranids unless you're Invasion Fleet and you can just get lethals, and then your entire army just wounds them easier. So I'm happy for you guys out there. But I end up losing this because bottom of 5, he had enough guys. He had Canis Rex shoulder burden. He moved on to the middle 2 objectives. And essentially, in order to tie the game, I had to kill Canis Rex entirely. Well, so with shoulder the burden, he's now a 2-up armor. He's a T13. He has a 5-up Feel No Pain because he killed Swarmlord the turn earlier. And this was the command phase that the 5-up Feel No Pain would proc, not the 6-up Feel No Pain. I think Canis was something like OC 12 or 13. And I was like, cool, I can't out OC you. There's no way that I can steal this objective now because I don't have enough Hormigons. And in order for you to not score the primary, I have to kill you now in the top of 5. I only had a couple guns on him. I think I had 2 Excrants, 1 Maleceptor, and 1 Tyranid. And I was like, I just have to roll hot. I only did like 3 damage to him with the Excrants and the Maleceptor. His saves were pretty good because I didn't have Swarmlord, so he rotated Ion Shields. So now he's 2-up, 4-up. Comes down to Tyranid. Roll 2 shots, hit both. Roll 2 wounds. Wound both. He saves 1. No, he fails both. CP rerolls, fails it again. Roll damage, 22 damage. So I would bring him from 24 to 2 in theory. Or no, 20. No, he was at 20 wounds. That's what it was. Because and then I'd already done 3 or something. I can't remember. Regardless, if he didn't have the Feel No Pain, he would have been dead. Rolls his Feel No Pains, and he saves 10 of the 22 on 5-ups. And I was like, all right, that's game. Let me just go in. Add up your primary. You win 92-76. Earlier in the game, when I had vected his rotate Ion Shields, he was getting pretty mad. He said, like, I no longer care if I win or lose this. And I was like, I don't know, man. I've got a tall order to beat you. And I don't think he wanted to hear it. But so my weekend inevitably ended as a 3-3. Some of the caveats that I think I've now thought about in a sounder mind and less emotional is that I had not practiced on the terrain. The acute angles that you need to shoot are more advantageous for units that can move faster, move further, have it assault. And that's something I really would have needed the Hive Tyrant for. I think also I was missing units that had invulnerables, just so I could potentially tank 50% of the damage, as opposed to in my Retaliation Cadre game, my Tyrannid were just eating every Melta that came through. AP5 ignore cover, because they were the closest target. At least with Maleceptors, I have a 50-50 on whether or not I take those hits, and I take that damage, and I'm able to CP reroll the 50-50 anyway. So in theory, I probably would have only had about 40% of the damage convert, not 100% like the Tyranid. So I think strictly for list building, triple Tyranid is probably not going to be super good at a higher level meta. At mid-level, where you're not expecting high AP, high damage stuff, but that's such a toss-up. I mean, there's Tau, Knights, there's plenty of Votan, they have high AP weapons that ignore cover too. I don't think it's worth the 380 plus 190. I can't do the math off the top of my head right now. 570 points for the 3 models. I think you're better just to run double rupture. I mean, you can crossfire, you can cover your angles. And the damage is consistent. And assuming they get heavy and you have 1 extra in proc, you're hitting on 2s, reeling 1s, and it's strength 18. So I think that's the way to go. If you're going to run Tyranid 1 to 2 is great. The other thing, I don't necessarily know having the horror specs in my list anymore is necessary. I think that having 2 extra squads of trash, particularly Hormigons, to run up and steal primary was my problem in some games. A lot of the reason why I was having 10 or 15 point spreads was only because my shadows got lucky. I was proccing shadow and they were failing battle shock on 2 key objectives. And all my Hormigons were running off, screening, maybe doing an action and dying. They weren't going and stealing primary. If a squad of Hormigons goes and steals a primary, 5 victory points is 110 points of value, and they're 65. They almost double their value just stealing. So it's better to have them hiding, run up and steal. You don't even have to charge. If it's something you can charge, like Cultists, you could probably win that fight. That's fine. But like normal Marines, I wouldn't. Or if it's like a vehicle, you can wrap. So I think that's something that I just didn't have in my head because in all of the matchups I was playing on GW terrain here at my home table, That was not really ever necessary. I could screen the board with 2 units of trash, Hormagaunts and Gargoyles, and get away with it. And I think realistically now you need 3 squads of Hormagaunts. I think Gargoyles being 20 points more, and our lists are just so tight, and Lictors win at 5 apiece. I really don't think there's a world, at least in the way that I want to build Crusher Stampede lists, in which I can run Gargoyles anymore. I think it has to be 2 or 3 squads of Hormagaunts. I just need the advance and charge. I need them to just go places. You know, if they move 10 plus 4 each turn, that's totally fine. All right, so specifically looking at what I think is going to be the first iteration of my list outside of the GT, we're going to turn a couple things, not necessarily on its head. I think we're just going to go back to a little bit of a core of what the list should be. We're going to have triple Exocrine. I'm going back to triple Maleceptor. I'm going back to the 2 Rupture effects just for your anti-tank. We're adding in the Walkerant, and now we kind of just got to fill in the middle because we got your leaders, we got your heavy supports, but what do we have in the middle? I have 2 squads of 10 Hormagaunts. Would I realistically like to have a third? Yes, I would. However, I think the 2 Lictors are also just standard, and they've got to stay. They're still good infiltrators. They're going to go off and get you. They're going to go off and be able to do missions that the Hormagaunts not necessarily aren't going to be able to do. The Hormagaunts are there to steal primary in opportunities that they can. They're OC20 when they stay alive and they don't get overwatched. The Lictors are not. The Lictors are your action monkeys. Hormagaunts go steal. They've got to have very strict roles, and I think you've got to keep it as such. Biovore's going to do Biovore things. Same thing, same as he's been doing for an entire year. I'm actually now, instead of having that 3rd squad of Hormagaunts, adding Raveners back in. I think not having the ability for your Lictors to stand idle and threaten the midfield against other lone ops or things that could potentially come in and threaten your monsters, especially Fights First. Fights First was scaring the World Eater opponent from throwing 8-bound at me. And I was like, well, at best, I'll probably kill 2. And he's like, yeah, but I don't want that. So there were instances that he could have charged my Lictors that he didn't just because it Fights First. So if that's an intimidation tactic you can use and you want to play sweaty, go ahead, use that. Tell your opponent that. But having the 3 Raveners is, we're not here to use them to be necessarily a rapid ingress to threaten the back, although you can use them that way because you can put them into reserve at this if you go second in turn 1. Yeah. You start them on the board, your opponent goes first, and you have bottom of 1. If they start them on the board, you can put them in reserve and come on the next turn. If they don't screen their backfield and you draw behind enemy lines or engage, that gets you full with the Biovore Spore, and they don't. So that was something I was not able to do with the Lictors previously. So that gives you +1 point for engage, because originally if you were only able to put in 3/4, it's just 3 points. So that's +1 point on engage, and it's also +1 point on behind enemy lines. So in games that I'm only winning by 10 points, being able to increase my win percentage or my win gap by 20% just by having the Raveners there, for 75 points, it's a much smaller percentage of your list than 75 points as a percentage of your list is much less than the investment to get a couple extra points. Pariah Nexus has specifically made it much harder to get those points, to get above 80, 90, potentially 100-point games. And the thing that I thought I was going to swear off putting in the list is actually a Psychophage. The points came down enough to 95 that it's a sub 100-point monster. It's 20 points still less expensive than a Carnifex. It's T10, might be T9, regardless. It has 10 wounds and it's a 5-up Feel No Pain. So effectively it has 15 wounds, or 14 wounds statistically, and the 6 of Feel No Pains. If I keep it near the Exocrines, the Maleceptors, and the Rupture effects, it increases their effective wounds by about 2. So instead of having something like 85 to 100 effective wounds on monsters, I've got more like 120. I think that alone, if he's also able to do an action like Sabotage in the backfield, it takes some burden off of the Lictors, and I think that's something that I've been missing. The Exocrines are there to advance and shoot. The Maleceptors are there to protect the midfield and just harass and blow up and be a mean, and the Rupture Fexes are there to just shoot big things. And if you don't have big things, you shoot Terminators. You hit on 2s, you win on 2s. I feel much more confident about this list now than I did over the weekend. So I'm actually going to be playing a practice game with this list against Matt Evans tomorrow. I don't know if he's going to be bringing the same Synaptic list that he brought over the weekend, or if he's going to be playing AdMech. He might be doing that just to show a friend that we're getting back into 40K, what the arm can do, and specific interactions. But this, I'm hoping this is going to be a fun game. If you made it through the whole video, I just want to appreciate your time and your attention. If you're new to the channel, I just want to appreciate you being here. I appreciate everybody who comes to listen to me for what little I can provide as an experience to improve your gameplay. Matt Evans actually has his own channel called Into the Hive Mind. Go ahead and check him out. He potentially will be doing a similar video that I've just done to recap his GT experience. He actually went 5-0-1, the one meaning the one tie and 5 wins. He and my other teammate Ben Neal actually went first and second. Ben went first with Vanguard Marines, and Matt Evans went second with Synaptic Nexus. So awesome job to them. Congratulations. And in third place, none other than Michael Mann with Bully Boy Orcs. I'll include them in a photo here in the wrap up at the end of the video here. But once again, I just want to thank you. I'll catch you next time on Hive Fleet Prometheus.